Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and this is part 2 of our build of Fujimi's 1/24th scale Chevrolet Astro van. And Fujimi is one of these rare model companies that's not afraid to do, I would say, modern era vehicles. I mean, geez, this went out of production almost 15 years ago, so it's kind of hard to say that it's a new vehicle. But at least, I think anything that's maybe post mid 1980s, 1990s, you'd have to consider to be modern era, which is something that a lot of model makers won't even touch. We're going to be getting the body painted and the interior done this episode. But to start off, I'm going to be showing duplicating one of these wheels that might be useful for modeling other GM vehicles. So in part 1 of this series, I had a couple people ask me to record the steps of making a mold and casting one of these wheels. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to need one of these wheels in the future, but you know what? Let's do it now. So actually, I'm recording this kind of at the first couple days of working on part 3 of my Wessex helicopters. But I'm doing it now because obviously it takes a while for the mold to dry and everything like that. If we look at this particular part, it's really deeply dished at the back. So this would not, using a one-sided mold, this wouldn't turn out very well. We need to put something in here to pack that out. So what I'm going to use is some ubiquitous Play-Doh. I'm just going to shove it all up into the inside here, so that way the latex isn't trying to fill that cavity. So as we see here, I've got the back of it all filled out with Play-Doh. And I made sure that the Play-Doh didn't actually come creeping out of those front holes. I packed it down a little bit. Now this means that when you've got your wheel all cast and everything like that, with one that's this thick, you're basically just going to have to put some black paint in the holes. But that usually ends up looking okay. For the Dodge Wrecker, I was able to actually drill out those holes after the casting was done. But in this case, we're going to be talking 3/4 of the width of the wheel. So the next step would be put some white glue on the back side of it and put it into a tray. Can't quite remember where I got this tray from, but I'll oftentimes use icing container lids like this. A little bit of white glue or carpenter's glue, either works fine, and just smoosh it down. Now, you want to make sure that, at least for something like a wheel or a tire, you want there to be a little bit of an undercut. You want the rubber to get slightly underneath, and that'll help you to get a nice, basically, tire shape. The main thing is you don't want the rubber to go all the way underneath, because then that'll trap you apart. But just as long as you have a little bit of an undercut, that's not too bad. The rubber is flexible enough that you should be able to peel it off. So this will have to dry till tomorrow, and then I'll start putting the rubber on. So here's our wheel mounted, and it's just like I said, on there with white glue. It'll come off quite easily. And the product I use to make my molds with is this mold builder here. Now you can use other materials. This is just a very inexpensive latex. I'm pretty sure that this container costs maybe $12, and you can make literally dozens of molds with it, whereas a lot of other products, they're not as inexpensive. So that's why I like using this one, because I'm not saying, oh geez, is it worth making a mold for? If it's something I think I might want from the future, I just go ahead and do it. So you're just going to brush it on. And of course, you want to make sure you get the undercut. So there's the first coat. And as I said, the important thing is any undercuts, you have to make sure you really mash the latex in there. I usually end up going around about maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch, just to give it a little bit more structural integrity. And I think you need to do maybe usually about 10 coats. And you can usually put maybe 3 coats on a day. So, and each coat you put on seems to dry faster. So, I'm not going to bore you by making you watch all 10 coats. So this mold I'm making of this Astrovan tire and wheel is probably about 11 coats of latex. I have to be honest, I wasn't keeping track because I was literally putting maybe 1 coat on every day, every 2 days or whatever, because I wasn't in any huge time constraints. So let's peel it off here and get it off the mold. And of course you can see there's the Play-Doh that we stuffed in there. And fortunately the latex didn't react to the wheel, so the wheel's still in fine shape. And you can see there's our mold. And for the end of the video, I'll go and I'll cast a wheel off this just so you can see how it's done. I usually like to leave a day between the time I pull it off of the original and when I do my first resin casting out of it. And that way I know that, you know, the latex is fully set up and dried. As a mold release for my molds, I usually use baby powder. And you just basically shoot some into the mold and then blow it out, and that'll just give you a nice coating. Alumilite suggests that you heat your molds before putting the Alumilite in them. And they're probably talking about their silicone molds. They actually suggest putting them on the microwave. What I would do with these latex molds is I just heat them up with a hairdryer, and that seems to work pretty good. So I mix up my A and B mixtures, or A and B parts of the Alumilite in these disposable shot glasses. That way you're not worried about reusing them or cleaning them. And I just have this old plate, well, it didn't start out old, that I do most of my pouring on. Don't worry, I won't get in trouble. This is advantages, I suppose, of no longer being married. But this is the only plate that I've messed up with the resin like that. Once you've mixed them up, I usually pour A into B. You give it a stir until it looks fairly uniform. And of course, time is of the essence. I usually take an old nail and I run it around the inside of the mold just to make sure that I dislodge any air bubbles. I have no idea if this is turning out, but I usually keep that up until I see the reaction starting to take place. And you can see it starting to get cloudy when that happens. The air bubbles are coming to the top. That's the dreaded pinholes that form in resin. It's about 10 minutes later, and this has actually given off quite a bit of heat. It's quite warm to the touch. When I did the engine casting for the bottom third of the truck, or the Dodge truck, that casting really got hot. So it's interesting how much heat that this gives off. It's obviously an endothermic reaction, although obviously Alumilite figures that putting a little bit of heat into it at the beginning is beneficial. That's why they want you to warm up the mold. Let's see if we can get this out now. There we go. The interesting thing is you can see a little bit of the residue of the Play-Doh that was originally in the part. Well, that's okay. You won't notice that when it's all painted up. So you'll sand off the back of this, and there we go. A, circa, I don't know, 1995 GMC wheel. ready to go. The only modification I'm going to be making to the body is this little molding right here is supposed to be painted up as a turn signal. And here in North America, the Astro van did not have those turn signals mounted. And somebody in the comments mentioned that in Europe, and so these are obviously sold at least somewhere in Europe. That explains why the tooling has these on here, but we don't want that on there, so I'm just going to take it off with a chisel blade and give it a light sanding, and that should get that off. So my plans had been to do this as an unclad van, which means I wasn't going to have the lower body cladding on. You can see that. I wasn't planning on putting these on because I kind of prefer the look without them. Mind you, an awful lot of these had them on. But where the difficulty lies is this body has been designed to basically have the cladding put on it. So this fender arch here isn't complete. Now, I could probably just build that with body putty pretty quickly. But where the difficulty lies is the rear bumper. The rear bumper is designed to be with the body cladding. And you can see how it kind of completes like that. And not only that, the front bumper is designed with the body cladding as well. So I don't absolutely hate it with the body cladding. So I think I'm just going to be putting the cladding on, and then I'm just going to paint it and move on with my life. One thing I am going to do, though, is if you look at the cladding for the back, somebody made a mistake. You can see the cladding actually has to go this high, which means that the door seam should go all the way down to here, because the cladding actually extends onto the door seam, and they haven't put those lines in. So we'll have to do that. So I've got the body cladding in place, and I think it looks pretty good. As I said earlier, I think I would have preferred to go without the cladding, but seeing as the rear bumper was basically designed with cladding in mind, I decided to go with it. And, you know, quite frankly, a lot of them had it. And if anything, the lower body cladding was something that General Motors was and probably still is well known for, of adding these big chunks of plastic on to kind of change the shape of a vehicle and, I don't know, make it seem sportier than it is. So this is ready for priming. I'm going to hit it with some basic gray primer, and then next will be the body color. And speaking of body color, I'm going to be using Duplicolor Dark Cherry Metallic, and it's an actual GM color. I don't know if this specific color was ever used on General Motors vans, on the Chevrolets and on the GMCs. I do know that there was what I took to be a burgundy color was used on a lot of these vans, and that's basically what I was looking for, and I have seen this color on vans. I was thinking of going with kind of a hunter green or a blue, but I don't really have that many cars in my model collection that are this color, so I thought, you know, let's go for something maybe a little bit different. So that's what we're going to go with, is dark cherry, which otherwise could be known as burgundy. As I mentioned in the last episode, I'm really quite happy with these seats. They look really, really nice. This little dimple here is where the armrest will go on. The only thing I'm not real happy about is every single seat has these two ejector pin marks on them. Now, yes, I know that they can be sanded off, and that's what I'm going to be doing. It's just one little additional task. It's a little bit of a pain. A nice touch by Fujimi is the front brakes. And basically this fits up inside the wheel. And I know it's barely going to be visible, but at least they bother to give you the caliper and a part that can be used to represent the disc. So I just gave it a coat of steel, and the caliper, which generally tends to look kind of rusty, I gave that rust. Barely visible behind the wheel, but at least they made the effort. I think I've done most of what I'm planning on doing with the underside. A little bit of weathering on the exhaust. Most of the rust has been concentrated up here. As I said before, anything that's post about 1985, give or take a couple of years depending on the model, would have had stainless steel exhaust, and you don't get nearly as much rusting. So I kept that to a minimum. One thing I did make sure I put quite a bit of rust on is the spare tire. I painted that gloss black, and then anything that was actually metal, I put a moderate to fair amount of Tester's rust on, because this is just basically mild steel painted black. They put it on the underside of the car, and of course you get all the rust or all the salt and brine and crap from the road in the wintertime hits these things, and they get really, really disgusting in any sort of climate that has winter. As anyone who's ever wound one of these things down, they get really horrible looking. So not much more is going to be going on weathering wise with this. You can see I've got the shock absorbers in there, and we do have a fair see-through effect up here, which is what I was looking for. Now time to move on to some of the tub stuff. I've primed all my interior parts with the same automotive primer that I used on the actual body. And the reason I did that was I'm planning on using these craft acrylics, and I find that they adhere much better to plastic when there's a little bit of teeth to it, e.g. there's a primer on there. When it's just the bare plastic, I find that you just kind of look at it wrong and the paint wears away or flakes off. So I don't know, maybe it's my stare or something. So I've got 3 colors here I'm going to be mixing up. I've got a dark red, a lighter red, and I've got a brown. This one's probably going to be used for the carpeting. This will be used for the seats, and then I'll come up with a couple other variations for parts of the interior. The main thing is you want everything to be in the same range of colors, but you want a bunch of different hues and textures. Some things need to be glossy, some things should be semi-gloss. And if you've looked carefully at the inside of a car, you'll know that's generally the way things are. So we can see I've got the burgundy or dark cherry, as it actually is, on our body. And this is something that I've always found rather annoying about metallic paint, is it's sparkly, but it's not particularly glossy. So I'm going to take some Tamiya gloss and I'm going to spray it and see if I can get it a little shinier. And this holds true for actual full-size cars, is if it's a metallic paint, you put it on, you're thinking, geez, it just doesn't seem very shiny. It sparkles, but it's not shiny. And that's mainly because of all the little flecks of glitter that's in it. And even on real cars, that's why they had to put a clear coat on to make it glossy. So we'll see if we can shine this up. Here's our door panels painted up, and I used my darkest variation of the inside color, and then I added a little bit of black to a few drops just so that I could do the speakers, because oddly enough Fujimi didn't actually mold any texture to them, so I figured if I went with a darker color it would hopefully suit the bill. So my interior is almost complete here, or I should say the kit parts are almost complete. I do want to add some clutter, crap, the sorts of things that families accumulate in their vehicles. I haven't put the front seats in, obviously. You can see the side door panels here, and let's just get a good focus on there. hopefully you can see that I've used about 3 or 4 different shades of the same red or reddish brown, especially if I'm trying to get a good light here. You can see this part here is similar in color to the floor, but it's different because try as automakers might, they never get all of the parts of all these different materials exactly the same. So, and believe it or not, I give quite a bit of thought to whether these little armrests were up or down. I figure this is a family of 4, and the back seat seldom gets used. So all of its little armrests and everything, as well as the pocket here, are all put up. The reason is when these seats get folded, all that stuff kind of gets neatened up. On the other hand, the middle row where the 2 kids sit all the time, this kid here, he's got his armrest down all the time because after all, he has to get past this console. This this armrest has been shoved up. This armrest is probably up almost all the time because otherwise you can't get in. And that was way more thinking of this than was necessary. So that's how our interior bucket is coming. And here is our dashboard. And Fujimi does give you a nice decal for there. And this was pretty much my darkest, shiniest variation of my interior color. And as with most, last 15, 20-year vehicles, there's no chrome bits on the dash. Everything is black. All the buttons are black. And yeah, I know they've got little bits of print on them, but in this scale, you're not going to see it. All right, the front seats are in, and I was just about to glue the dashboard in when I realized there was something I was going to mention. Fujimi did a really good job on the tooling for this kit. There's only one thing that, in my opinion, I got wrong. And I think what it is these footwells are probably not quite as deep as they should be, because anyone who ever drove one of these GM Astro or Safari vans will tell you that the front wheel well actually intruded quite a ways into this space, to the point where as you were driving, your left foot inevitably would be just kind of sitting on it. And of course, we don't see that here. So I'm thinking that this particular part right here is supposed to be forward by a ways. It's just a little niggling fact, and when we put it all together, no one's going to be able to see it. But if you ever drove one of these things, you'll know that the wheel wells really intruded into this space right here. Just saying. Otherwise, the tooling on this is pretty awesome. There's the kit parts for the interior all put together. And we've got kit parts of the underframe all put together. You still need to do a fair amount of work on the body. Yes, I know it's basically been painted, but need to do trim work and everything like that. I need to finish painting the interior. I need to put some sun visors in, a few other things. Plus, as I said before, I want to make this look a little bit more lived in. And I got some other stuff I got to do. And if I wait till I've done all that, till I finish off this video, number one, the video will probably be like 35-40 minutes long, which is too long. And it's going to be too long before it goes up. So I'm going to put this video up. It's going to be a 3-part series. Sorry. But until next time, just keep on modeling, and thanks for watching.